Part 1. Experience isn't measured in years. Every graduation season, I hear the same question from students again and again. They say, "Professor, I'm only 22 years old. I just graduated from college. I've never had a full-time job. So why do employers keep asking for experience?" At first, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable question. And honestly, if I were graduating today, I might ask the same thing. But after many years of teaching at the university level and helping students prepare for their careers, I've realized there's one major misunderstanding about the word experience. Most students believe experience is measured by the number of years you've been employed. That's not how employers see it. When companies hire recent graduates, they don't expect someone with 5 or 10 years of work experience. They know you're just beginning your career. What they really want to know is much simpler. During your 4 years in college, what did you actually accomplish? What did you create? Did you build something that real people could use? Did you solve an actual problem? Did you work with real users, real clients, or real teammates? Did you ever take an idea and turn it into something meaningful? Those are the experiences employers care about. Experience isn't measured by the number of years you've worked. It's measured by the number of real problems you've learned to solve. And that's where so many students misunderstand the hiring process. Over the years, I've met countless hardworking students. Many of them earned outstanding grades. Some graduated with impressive GPAs. But whenever I asked one simple question, "What have you actually built?" the room often became very quiet. Because earning an A in a class and creating something valuable in the real world are two completely different things. A transcript tells employers that you completed a course. A real project tells them that you know how to apply what you've learned. Those are not the same. Think about it this way. Imagine you're hiring someone to renovate your home. One candidate tells you, "I graduated at the top of my class in construction management." Another candidate says, "I've renovated 3 small apartments. None of the projects were perfect, but each one taught me something new." Which person would you trust more? For most people, the answer is obvious. The second person has something far more valuable than perfect grades. They have real experience, not because they've worked for decades, but because they've faced real challenges, made real mistakes, and figured out how to solve real problems. That's exactly how the workplace works. Employers aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for evidence. Evidence that you've stepped outside the classroom. Evidence that you've taken initiative. Evidence that you've tried something difficult, struggled, adapted, and improved. Even a project that failed can be incredibly valuable because it proves that you were willing to take action and learn from the experience. In fact, many employers would rather hear about the lessons you learned from a failed project than hear that you earned another A on an exam. Why? Because business doesn't work like school. In school, most questions already have the correct answer. In the real world, they usually don't. Every customer is different. Every project brings unexpected challenges. Every decision involves uncertainty. That's why employers value people who know how to think, experiment, adapt, and solve problems, not just people who know how to memorize information. So if you're still in college, don't spend all 4 years chasing grades alone. Chase experiences. Build something. Volunteer for a project. Join a student organization. Help a local business. Develop an app. Launch a website. Create a service. Solve a problem that someone actually has. Because one day, when you're sitting across from a hiring manager in your very first job interview, the question probably won't be, "What was your GPA?" Instead, they'll ask something much more important. "Tell me about something you've built." And the answer to that question may become the single most important story you tell in your entire career. Part 2. Great careers are built by solving problems, not collecting grades. One of the biggest differences between college and the real world is the way knowledge is used. In college, every subject is taught separately. You take a programming class, a database class, a marketing class, a design class, a cybersecurity class, and maybe a business class. You study each course, complete the assignments, take the final exam, earn your grade, and then move on to the next semester. For many students, that's where the learning ends. Each subject is placed into its own little box. And once the semester is over, that box is closed and rarely opened again. Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works. Businesses don't have problems called web programming or database systems. They don't wake up one morning and say, Today we have a Java assignment to finish. Real companies face real business challenges. They need more customers. They need to increase sales. They need to improve customer satisfaction. They need to protect sensitive data. They need to streamline operations, reduce costs, launch new products, and stay competitive in an ever-changing market. Solving those problems requires much more than knowledge from a single college course. It requires the ability to connect ideas from multiple disciplines and apply them together. Think about building an online store. Writing the code is only one piece of the puzzle. Someone has to design an interface that customers actually enjoy using. Someone has to create marketing campaigns that attract visitors. Someone has to analyze customer behavior and improve the shopping experience. Someone has to secure payment information and protect user data. Someone has to manage inventory, customer support, and logistics. Every successful product is the result of many different skills working together toward one common goal. That's why I always encourage students to build friendships outside their own major. If you're studying computer science, find a friend who studies marketing. If you're majoring in marketing, work with someone who studies graphic design. If you're an accounting student, collaborate with someone in business administration or information technology. The workplace is built on collaboration, and college is the perfect place to start learning how to work with people who think differently from you. You don't need a $1 million startup. You don't need investors. You don't need a revolutionary invention. In fact, you don't even need to make money at the beginning. What you need is a real problem worth solving. Start small. Solve one problem for one group of people. That's enough. For example, maybe students at your university struggle to find affordable used textbooks. Build a website that helps them buy and sell books. Maybe first-year students don't know which courses are difficult or which professors have different teaching styles. Create a platform where experienced students can share advice and study resources. Maybe local small businesses don't have a professional website. Offer to build one for them. Maybe a nonprofit organization needs help managing volunteers. Develop a simple system that makes their work easier. None of these ideas will change the world overnight, but every one of them will teach you something that no textbook ever can. Will every project succeed? Of course not. Some ideas won't work. Some products won't attract users. Some teams will struggle with communication. Some projects will run out of time or resources. That's completely normal. Failure is not the opposite of experience. Failure is often where experience begins. Every obstacle teaches you something. You learn how to communicate with teammates. You learn how to deal with disagreement. You learn how to manage deadlines. You learn how to listen to feedback, improve your work, and adapt when your original plan falls apart. Those lessons cannot be learned by reading slides or memorizing definitions. They can only be learned by doing real work. Years later, when you walk into a job interview, employers won't just ask what classes you took. They'll ask what you've built, what challenges you've faced, and what you've learned along the way. At that moment, every project you completed, whether it succeeded or failed, becomes part of your story. And that's the story employers want to hear, because it shows them that you're capable of learning, adapting, collaborating, and creating value in the real world. The most successful graduates aren't always the ones with the highest GPAs. More often, they're the ones who leave college with a portfolio of real experiences, real projects, and real lessons learned. Knowledge opens the door, but experience convinces employers to invite you in. So don't spend your college years collecting grades alone. Spend them building skills, solving problems, and creating something that truly matters. Years from now, you probably won't remember every exam you took, but you'll never forget the projects that challenged you, changed you, and prepared you for the career ahead. Part 3. Your first job interview starts long before graduation. Let me tell you something that many students don't realize until it's too late. Your first job interview doesn't begin when you walk into the interview room. It begins years earlier, while you're still in college. Every project you choose to work on, every challenge you decide to take, and every problem you try to solve becomes part of the story you'll eventually tell an employer. Imagine you're sitting across from a hiring manager during your first interview. After a few introductions, they smile and ask a simple question. Tell me about your experience. Many graduates immediately start talking about their GPA, the courses they completed, or the grades they earned. They might say, I received an A in web development. Or, I graduated with honors. Those are achievements worth being proud of, but they rarely make you memorable. Now imagine a different answer. You say, during my junior year, 3 classmates and I built an online marketplace where students could buy and sell used textbooks and dorm furniture. We spent 6 months developing the platform. At first, almost nobody used it. We struggled to attract users. And we eventually realized that our marketing strategy was completely wrong. We redesigned the website, improved the user experience, promoted it through student organizations. And although the project never became a successful business, we learned more in those 6 months than we had learned in an entire semester of lectures. Which answer do you think will start a more interesting conversation? The second one, every single time. Why? Because employers aren't simply hiring people who know information. They're hiring people who know how to solve problems. They're looking for curiosity, initiative, resilience, communication skills, and the ability to learn from experience. A real project demonstrates all of those qualities far better than a transcript ever could. One of the biggest misconceptions students have is believing that only successful projects are worth talking about. That's simply not true. Some of the most valuable lessons come from projects that don't go as planned. Failure forces you to ask difficult questions. What went wrong? What assumptions did we make? What could we have done differently? How would we approach the problem today? Those are exactly the kinds of reflections that show maturity and professional growth. In fact, experienced interviewers often care less about whether your project succeeded and more about how you handled setbacks. Did you give up at the first obstacle? Or did you keep improving? Did you blame other people? Or did you take responsibility? Did you learn something meaningful from the experience? Your answers reveal far more about your future potential than the final outcome of the project itself. That's why I encourage students to stop thinking like exam takers and start thinking like problem solvers. Instead of asking, "What assignment do I need to finish this week?" ask yourself, "What problem can I solve this month?" That small shift in mindset can completely change your college experience. You don't need to build the next Facebook, Amazon, or Google. You don't need millions of users or venture capital funding. You simply need evidence that you can identify a problem, organize a team, create a solution, and learn throughout the process. Even helping a local coffee shop improve its online presence, building a scheduling system for a student club, or creating a simple mobile app for your campus community can become a powerful story in a job interview. Remember, employers don't expect recent graduates to know everything. What they hope to find is someone who is willing to learn, capable of adapting, and confident enough to tackle unfamiliar challenges. Those qualities are difficult to measure with grades alone, but they become obvious when you describe a real project you've worked on. So don't wait until your final semester to think about your resume. Start building it today. Every meaningful project you complete becomes another chapter in your professional story. Every challenge you overcome becomes another example of your ability to grow. And every lesson you learn brings you one step closer to becoming the kind of professional employers are genuinely excited to hire. When your first interview finally arrives, you won't need to invent impressive answers or exaggerate your accomplishments. You'll simply tell your own story. And if that story is built on real experiences, honest effort, and genuine learning, it will speak far louder than any GPA ever could. Part 4. AI won't replace you, but someone who uses AI better might. Over the past few years, one topic has completely transformed education and the workplace: artificial intelligence. Everywhere you look, people are talking about AI. Some are excited about it. Others are afraid of it. Students often ask me the same question: "Professor, is AI going to take my job?" My answer is always the same. No, AI is not your biggest threat. The real threat is becoming someone who stops thinking because AI is doing all the thinking for you. Let me be very clear. I am not against AI. In fact, I use AI almost every single day. It helps me research ideas, organize information, improve my writing, generate new perspectives, and work more efficiently than ever before. Used wisely, AI is one of the most powerful learning tools ever created. The problem isn't the technology. The problem is how people choose to use it. I've noticed a growing pattern among many students. They receive an assignment, open an AI chatbot, copy the question, wait a few seconds, copy the answer, and submit it as their own work. The assignment gets finished quickly. But something important never happens. They never wrestle with the problem. They never struggle through the confusion. They never develop the critical thinking that real learning requires. Learning has never been about finding answers as quickly as possible. Learning is about developing the ability to ask better questions, evaluate different solutions, recognize mistakes, and make sound decisions. If AI does all of that for you, then you're not actually learning. You're simply outsourcing your thinking. Sometimes I ask my students a very direct question. If your entire job can be reduced to typing a prompt into an AI tool and copying the response, then why would a company need to hire you? Your manager can use AI. Your CEO can use AI. Your clients can use AI. The technology is available to everyone. So what makes you valuable? The answer isn't your ability to use AI. Almost everyone will learn that skill. Your value comes from something much deeper. It's your ability to judge whether the AI's answer is correct. It's your ability to recognize when important information is missing. It's your ability to understand the context, identify risks, communicate with people, and make responsible decisions when the stakes are high. Imagine AI writes thousands of lines of software code. That's impressive. But who will be responsible if the system crashes and customers lose their data? Imagine AI creates a brilliant marketing campaign. Who will explain the results if the campaign fails to reach its audience? Imagine AI recommends a business strategy that looks perfect on paper but ignores cultural differences, legal requirements, or customer expectations. At the end of the day, someone still has to make the final decision, and that someone is a human being. This is why critical thinking has become more important than ever before. The future doesn't belong to people who simply know how to use AI. It belongs to people who know how to think with AI. Those are two very different skills. Think of AI as an incredibly intelligent assistant. It can generate ideas, summarize information, analyze data, and save you hours of routine work. But it cannot replace your judgment, your curiosity, your creativity, your empathy, or your sense of responsibility. Those qualities remain uniquely human, and they are exactly what employers will continue to value. The greatest danger isn't that AI becomes smarter. The greatest danger is that people become intellectually passive. When we stop asking questions, stop challenging assumptions, stop testing ideas, and stop thinking independently, we slowly lose the very abilities that make us valuable in the first place. So don't use AI as a shortcut to avoid learning. Use it as a partner that helps you learn more deeply. Ask it to explain difficult concepts. Ask it to challenge your ideas. Ask it to review your work and suggest improvements. Let it make you a stronger thinker, not a more dependent one. The students who will thrive in the age of artificial intelligence won't be the ones who compete against AI. They will be the ones who combine human intelligence with artificial intelligence to create something neither could achieve alone. That's the future of work. And that's the future you should be preparing for today. Part 5. The question that will shape your future. If I could leave every college student with just one piece of advice, it would be this: don't go to college simply to earn a degree. Go to college to become someone who can create value. Don't measure your education by the number of classes you've completed. Measure it by the number of real problems you've learned to solve. Don't spend 4 years collecting grades while waiting for someone else to tell you what to do. Spend those years building, experimenting, collaborating, and discovering what you're capable of achieving. The world doesn't reward people simply because they worked hard in school. It rewards people who can make a meaningful contribution. Every company, every organization, and every community is looking for people who can improve something, fix something, create something, or help someone. That's where your value comes from. Use every opportunity you have while you're still a student. Join a club, volunteer in your community, build an app, design a website, start a small business, help a nonprofit organization, create content, conduct research, teach others. It doesn't matter whether your project is large or small. What matters is that you step outside your comfort zone and apply what you've learned in a real-world setting. And don't be afraid to fail. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, and business leaders in the world have experienced failure many times. What separates them from everyone else isn't that they never made mistakes. It's that they refused to let failure become the end of their story. Every setback became another lesson. Every obstacle became another opportunity to grow. As you move through your career, technology will continue to change. Artificial intelligence will become more powerful. New industries will emerge, some jobs will disappear, and others that don't even exist today will be created. The people who thrive in that future won't necessarily be the smartest people in the room. They'll be the people who never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never stop asking meaningful questions. Your degree may help you get your first interview, but it won't build your career. Your career will be built by your character, your curiosity, your willingness to learn, and your ability to solve problems that matter. Those qualities can't be printed on a diploma. They have to be demonstrated through action. So don't use college as a place to simply prepare for life. Treat college as the place where life begins. Every semester is an opportunity to become a little more capable than you were before. Every challenge is an invitation to grow. Every project is another chance to discover strengths you never knew you had. One day, you'll sit across from an employer in your first job interview. They probably won't spend much time asking about your GPA. They probably won't ask how many AI tools you know how to use. What they'll really want to understand is who you are, how you think, what you've accomplished, and what kind of value you can bring to their organization. In the end, there is one question every student should ask themselves long before graduation. What value have I created during my years in college? If you can answer that question with real projects, meaningful experiences, lessons learned from failure, and problems you've helped solve, then you've already built something far more valuable than a resume. You've built the foundation of a successful career. And remember this: experience isn't measured by time. It's measured by growth. Education isn't measured by grades. It's measured by impact. Success isn't measured by how much you know. It's measured by what you're able to do with what you know. So start today. Stay curious. Keep building. Keep learning. Keep solving problems. Because your future won't be determined by the diploma hanging on your wall. It will be determined by the value you create for the people around you. And that's what real education is all about. Part 6. College doesn't teach you how to see opportunities. After many years of standing at the front of a classroom, I've noticed something that has never stopped surprising me. Every graduation season, I meet bright, hard-working students who have spent 4 years earning good grades, completing assignments, and passing exams. They know how to write code, design websites, analyze data, build marketing plans, and even use artificial intelligence to solve complex tasks. By every academic measure, they're well prepared. Yet when I ask one simple question, the confidence in the room often disappears. I ask, if no one gave you an assignment tomorrow, what problem would you choose to solve? More often than not, the answer is silence. Some students smile nervously. Others look down at their notebooks. Eventually, someone says, "Honestly, Professor, I have no idea." For a long time, I believed the answer was simple. I thought students just needed more knowledge. Another programming course, another design project, another semester of business or marketing. But after years of watching generation after generation walk across the graduation stage, I realized the problem had nothing to do with knowledge at all. Today's students know more than any generation before them. Information has never been easier to access. With a laptop and an internet connection, anyone can learn almost anything. The real problem is something much deeper. We've taught students how to solve problems, but we've rarely taught them how to notice problems in the first place. That may sound like a small difference, but it changes everything. Think about how we've all been educated. From elementary school to university, someone else has always decided what the problem is. A teacher writes a question on the board. A professor assigns a project. An exam asks for the correct answer. Success means solving a problem that somebody else has already identified. After spending 15 or 20 years learning this way, it's only natural that many graduates become very good at waiting for instructions. They become experts at answering questions, but they never learn how to ask the questions that truly matter. Then graduation arrives, and suddenly the rules change. The world outside the university doesn't hand you assignments. Companies don't wake up in the morning and say, "Today our biggest challenge is to finish Chapter 5. They wake up wondering why customers are leaving, why sales are slowing down, why employees waste so much time on repetitive work, or why competitors seem to innovate faster. Those are the real questions that drive businesses every day. And that's when many graduates feel lost, not because they lack knowledge, but because nobody ever taught them how to see what needs to be solved. In my opinion, this is one of the biggest blind spots in higher education. Universities do an excellent job of teaching knowledge and technical skills, but far less time is spent teaching students how to recognize opportunities hidden inside everyday problems. Yet that ability is often what separates people who simply look for jobs from those who create value wherever they go. There's one sentence I hope every student remembers after listening to this talk. The world doesn't reward people simply because they know more. It rewards people who make life a little easier, businesses a little better, or other people a little more successful. In other words, people are not paid for what they know. They're paid for the value they create with what they know. And once you truly understand that idea, you'll never look at your education, or the world around you, the same way again. Part 7. Knowledge becomes valuable only when it changes someone's life. One of the biggest misconceptions many students develop during college is believing that the goal of education is to accumulate knowledge. Every semester they work hard to learn new theories, memorize important concepts, complete assignments, and prepare for exams. Little by little, they collect more and more knowledge, almost as if they were filling a warehouse with valuable tools. The problem is that very few students ever stop to ask an important question. What are these tools actually for? Knowledge, by itself, has very little value. A programming language has no value until it helps someone solve a real problem. A marketing strategy has no value until it helps a business reach more customers. Artificial intelligence has no value until it saves people time, improves decisions, or creates something meaningful. Even the most advanced technology in the world is worthless if it never improves anyone's life. The value is never found inside the tool itself. The value is created when that tool changes someone's experience for the better. I remember meeting a student who proudly showed me a website he had spent weeks building. From a technical perspective, it was excellent. The design looked modern, the code was clean, the database worked perfectly, and every button performed exactly as expected. After he finished demonstrating all the features, I asked him a very simple question. Who will actually use this website? He paused for a moment before answering. I don't know. I built it because I wanted to practice. That short conversation stayed with me for years because it revealed a problem that goes far beyond one student or one project. He had successfully learned how to build a website, but nobody had challenged him to think about why that website should exist. The project demonstrated technical ability, but it created no value because it wasn't solving a real problem for a real person. The longer I teach, the more convinced I become that education should begin with people rather than technology. Instead of asking students, "What programming language are you learning this semester?" I would rather ask, "Whose life could become easier because of what you're learning?" That single question changes the entire direction of learning. Suddenly, a database course is no longer about tables and relationships. It becomes an opportunity to help a small business organize customer information. A web development course is no longer about HTML and CSS. It becomes a chance to help a local charity introduce its work to more people. A marketing course is no longer just about advertising theories. It becomes a way to help a neighborhood cafe attract customers who would never have discovered it otherwise. Once you begin thinking this way, every subject in college starts to look completely different. Instead of seeing individual courses, you begin to see a growing collection of tools. Each semester adds another tool to your toolbox. Programming becomes a tool, design becomes a tool, statistics becomes a tool, artificial intelligence becomes another tool, communication skills become another tool. But just like a toolbox sitting in a garage, those tools have no purpose until someone uses them to build, repair, improve, or create something that matters. Collecting more tools does not automatically make someone useful. Knowing when to use the right tool for the right problem is what creates value. This is one of the reasons I encourage students to spend less time asking, "How can I become better at this software?" and more time asking, "Who needs help today?" The second question naturally leads to the first. Once you discover a real problem, you become motivated to learn whatever knowledge is necessary to solve it. Learning is no longer driven by grades. It is driven by purpose. Instead of studying because an exam is approaching, you study because someone genuinely needs a solution that you are capable of creating. When education is connected to real life in this way, something remarkable begins to happen. Your assignments no longer feel meaningless because you can imagine how they might help someone. Your projects become more creative because they are inspired by real situations instead of imaginary case studies. Most importantly, you stop measuring your education by how much information you have memorized and begin measuring it by how much value you can create for other people. That shift in perspective may sound simple, but it has the power to transform not only the way you learn, but also the way you build your future career. In the next part, I'd like to introduce a habit that completely changed the way I observe the world. It is a habit so simple that anyone can practice it every day. Yet it has helped countless entrepreneurs, innovators, and problem solvers discover opportunities that other people walk past without ever noticing. Part 8. Train your eyes to see what others miss. Several years ago, I walked across campus with two students after one of my classes. We weren't discussing technology or business. We were simply heading toward a coffee shop near the university. As we sat down with our drinks, I asked them a question that seemed completely unrelated to anything they had learned that day. I asked, "What did you notice on the way here?" The first student looked a little confused and answered, "Nothing, really. We just walked here." The second student paused for a moment before saying, "I noticed the coffee shop next to the bookstore had a line almost out the door, while the cafe across the street was nearly empty. I also noticed that several students were standing outside because there weren't enough seats. And almost everyone who ordered was paying with their phones." That answer immediately caught my attention, not because it was right or wrong, but because it revealed something important. The two students had walked along the exact same path at the exact same time. Yet they had experienced two completely different worlds. One student saw buildings, sidewalks, and people. The other saw patterns, behaviors, frustrations, and possibilities. That difference had nothing to do with intelligence. It had nothing to do with grades. It certainly had nothing to do with talent. It came down to one simple habit. One student had trained himself to observe, while the other had trained himself only to look. There's an enormous difference between looking and observing. Looking requires your eyes. Observing requires your curiosity. Most people walk through life seeing objects. Curious people walk through life seeing systems. They notice where people hesitate, where they become frustrated, where they waste time, where they repeat the same task over and over again, or where they quietly invent their own shortcuts because the existing process doesn't work very well. Those small moments may seem insignificant, but they often reveal opportunities that everyone else overlooks. I've come to believe that opportunities rarely arrive wearing a sign that says, "This is a great business idea." Instead, they disguise themselves as everyday inconveniences. They hide inside long waiting lines, confusing websites, paperwork that takes too long to complete, products that are difficult to use, or services that leave customers feeling disappointed. Most people experience these inconveniences and move on with their day. Opportunity seekers stop and ask one more question. Why does this happen? And could it be done better? That single question has launched countless innovations throughout history. If you study the stories of successful entrepreneurs, you'll notice something fascinating. Very few of them began with a brilliant invention. More often, they began by paying close attention to ordinary people living ordinary lives. They listened carefully. They watched patiently. They noticed what everyone else had accepted as normal. And they refused to believe that normal was necessarily the best we could do. Innovation rarely begins with imagination alone. More often, it begins with observation. The wonderful thing about observation is that anyone can learn it. You don't need extraordinary intelligence, expensive equipment, or years of experience. You simply need to become more intentional about the way you move through the world. The next time you visit a grocery store, don't think only about what you're buying. Watch how customers search for products. Notice where they become confused. Pay attention to the questions they ask employees. If you ride public transportation, observe where people lose time or become frustrated. If you spend an afternoon in a hospital, a bank, a library, or even your own neighborhood, you'll quickly discover that every place contains dozens of small problems waiting for someone to solve them. One exercise has changed the way I observe the world, and I often recommend it to my students. Every evening before you go to bed, write down 3 moments during the day when you noticed someone struggling with something. No matter how small it seemed. Don't try to solve the problem immediately. Just collect observations. At first, finding 3 examples may feel difficult. After a few weeks, you'll begin noticing 10 or 20. Eventually, you'll realize something remarkable. The world hasn't changed at all. The only thing that has changed is the way you see it. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Opportunities are not reserved for extraordinary people living extraordinary lives. They surround every one of us every single day. The difference is that some people have trained their eyes to recognize them, while others are still waiting for someone else to point them out. In the next part, we'll explore why this ability has become even more valuable in the age of artificial intelligence, and why the future may belong not to those who know the most, but to those who notice what others fail to see. Part 9. Don't chase the perfect idea. Start with the smallest problem. One of the most common questions students ask me after learning how to observe the world is, "Professor, I've started noticing problems everywhere. But how do I know which one is worth turning into a project?" I always smile because that's exactly the point where many people become stuck. They believe they need one brilliant idea that will change the world, attract millions of users, or become the next billion-dollar company. They spend months searching for the perfect idea, waiting for a moment of inspiration that never comes. In reality, that mindset often prevents them from starting at all. The projects that truly change people's lives rarely begin as grand visions. More often, they begin with a single, ordinary problem experienced by a single person. Think about the products and services you use every day. Many of them didn't start by trying to solve every problem for everyone. They started by solving one small problem exceptionally well. Only after proving that they created value did they continue to grow. Progress almost always begins with something small enough to understand deeply. This is why I encourage my students to stop asking, "Which idea has the biggest market?" and start asking a much simpler question. "Whose day can I make just a little easier?" That question immediately changes your perspective. Instead of chasing a huge opportunity that feels impossible to reach, you begin looking for one person, one community, one classroom, one small business, or even one member of your own family whose daily routine could be improved. When you focus on helping one real person solve one real problem, you gain something far more valuable than an interesting idea. You gain feedback, experience, and a much deeper understanding of how people actually use what you create. One mistake I see repeatedly is that students fall in love with their solution before they fully understand the problem. They spend weeks building an application, designing beautiful interfaces, or writing thousands of lines of code, only to discover that nobody really needs what they created. That's why I believe every successful project should begin with conversations, not computers. Before opening your laptop, spend time talking to the people who experience the problem every day. Ask them what frustrates them most. Ask them what they have already tried. Ask them what they wish existed. Listen far more than you speak. Very often, those conversations will save you weeks or even months of building something that nobody wants. Another lesson I've learned over the years is that your first solution doesn't have to be sophisticated. Students often assume they must build a complete mobile application or an advanced AI system before they can test an idea. But in many cases, the simplest solution is the smartest place to begin. A spreadsheet might solve the problem. A shared online form might solve the problem. A simple website, a digital checklist, or even a redesigned paper process might solve the problem. The goal of your first project is not to impress people with technology. The goal is to discover whether you're solving the right problem. As your understanding grows, your solution will naturally become better. Every conversation teaches you something new. Every small improvement reveals another opportunity. Every person you help gives you insights that no textbook could ever provide. That's why I tell my students that projects should evolve like conversations, not monuments. They are meant to grow, adapt, and improve as you learn more about the people you serve. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: don't measure your project by how complicated it is. Measure it by how useful it becomes. A simple tool that saves someone 10 minutes every day creates far more value than a sophisticated system that nobody chooses to use. Real innovation isn't about making things more complex. It's about making life a little simpler for someone else. And once you experience the satisfaction of solving one genuine problem for one real person, you'll begin to understand something that no classroom can fully teach. Confidence doesn't come from having the perfect idea. It comes from creating value, one small solution at a time. In the final part of this talk, I'd like to leave you with one idea that I hope you'll carry long after graduation, an idea that may completely change the way you think about your education, your career, and the purpose of the knowledge you continue to learn throughout your life. Part 10. The day your education truly begins. Before I leave you today, I'd like to ask you to imagine a moment that may happen many years from now. Picture yourself walking back onto your university campus after graduation. The buildings are still there. The library hasn't changed. The hallways still echo with conversations between students rushing to their next class. The coffee shop is still crowded. The security guard still smiles at people as they enter the gate. At first glance, everything looks exactly the way you remember it. But then you realize something extraordinary has changed. It isn't the campus, it's you. Years earlier, you walked through these same paths thinking only about lectures, assignments, deadlines, and examinations. You were focused on earning credits, passing courses, and reaching graduation. Today, you see the same campus through completely different eyes. You notice the long line outside the Student Services office and immediately begin wondering why the process takes so long. You watch students searching for empty study spaces and start thinking about how that experience could be improved. You overhear someone talking about a daily frustration and instinctively begin asking yourself what kind of solution might make that person's life easier. Nothing around you has changed. Yet everything feels different because the way you think has changed. I believe this is the moment when education reveals its true purpose. A university degree is not the finish line of learning, it is simply the foundation. The real education begins when you leave the classroom and start applying what you've learned to real people, real situations, and real challenges. Every conversation becomes a lesson. Every workplace becomes a classroom. Every problem becomes an invitation to learn something new. The world itself becomes your teacher, if you're willing to pay attention. Many people spend their entire careers searching for the perfect job, hoping to find a position that will give them meaning and fulfillment. But I've come to believe that the most meaningful careers are rarely found. They are built, one problem at a time. Every time you help someone work more efficiently, communicate more clearly, save time, reduce stress, or achieve something they couldn't accomplish before, you're building a career with purpose. Titles may change, companies may come and go. Technology will certainly continue to evolve, but the ability to improve another person's life will never go out of demand. As you move forward, remember that your education should never be measured only by the degrees hanging on your wall or the certificates stored on your computer. Those achievements represent what you have learned, but they do not define what you can contribute. Your true education is reflected in the lives you improve, the problems you solve, the opportunities you create, and the trust you earn from people who believe in your work. Those are the accomplishments that no transcript can fully capture. The world you are entering will continue to change faster than any generation has ever experienced. New technologies will emerge, entire industries will transform, jobs will disappear, and new professions will be created. It would be impossible for any university to prepare students for every challenge the future will bring. But there is one ability that will remain valuable regardless of how much the world changes: the ability to understand people, recognize meaningful problems, and create solutions that genuinely improve lives. That ability doesn't become obsolete when technology changes. In many ways, it becomes even more valuable. So if there's one hope I have for every student listening today, it is not that you graduate with the highest grades, master every new technology, or become the smartest person in the room. My hope is much simpler than that. I hope you become someone who pays attention, someone who listens before speaking, someone who notices what others ignore, someone who chooses to create value wherever you go. Because people like that don't wait for opportunities to appear. They create them. And perhaps one day, years from now, someone much younger will ask you the same question I asked my students for so many years: where should I begin? When that day comes, I hope your answer won't start with a programming language, a business strategy, or a list of technical skills. I hope you'll simply smile and say, begin by looking at the world more carefully. The opportunities you're searching for have been around you all along. You just haven't learned how to see them yet. If this talk changes even one thing about the way you walk through your day tomorrow, then it has already accomplished its purpose. Because the moment you begin seeing the world differently is the moment your education truly begins. Part 1a. College doesn't teach you how to see opportunities. After many years of standing at the front of a classroom, there's one question that has stayed with me more than any lecture I've ever given. Every year, I meet brilliant students. Some are talented programmers, others are gifted designers, skilled marketers, or exceptionally good at using artificial intelligence. They complete their assignments on time, graduate with impressive grades, and demonstrate solid technical knowledge. By every academic standard, they appear well prepared for the future. Yet whenever I ask one simple question, the room often falls silent. If no professor assigned you another project tomorrow, what real-world problem would you choose to solve? Most students hesitate. Some smile awkwardly. Others quietly admit that they have never thought about it. A few tell me they'll figure it out after they graduate and start working. For a long time, I believed the problem was that students simply needed more knowledge. I thought another programming course, another business class, or another semester of design would eventually help them discover their own ideas. But after years of teaching, I realized I was asking the wrong question. Today's students don't suffer from a lack of knowledge. In fact, no generation in history has had greater access to learning than this one. With nothing more than a laptop and an internet connection, students can learn software development from world-class engineers, study design from leading professionals, explore artificial intelligence, digital marketing, finance, entrepreneurship, and almost any other discipline imaginable. AI can explain difficult concepts, write code, analyze data, and even act as a personal tutor. Information has never been more abundant or more accessible. And yet, something important is still missing. Having more knowledge doesn't automatically mean creating more value. I've met countless students who spend 4 years in college mastering theories, completing assignments, and passing exams without ever building something that genuinely improves another person's life. They finish one course after another, but each subject ends where the semester ends. The knowledge remains inside notebooks, presentations, and final exams, while the real world continues to struggle with thousands of unsolved problems outside the classroom. The more I think about it, the more convinced I become that this isn't a problem of intelligence. It's a problem of perspective. Many students have never been taught to look at the world through the eyes of someone who creates value. From the moment we enter school, we're trained to answer questions rather than ask them. Teachers give us problems, and we solve them. Professors assign projects, and we complete them. Exams present questions, and we search for the correct answers. Year after year, someone else defines the problem while we focus entirely on finding the solution. Without realizing it, we develop a habit that follows us all the way into adulthood. We wait for someone else to tell us what needs to be done before we begin thinking. The real world doesn't work that way. When you graduate, no one hands you a list of perfectly defined problems to solve. Companies don't hire people simply because they remember theories or score well on exams. They hire people who can recognize opportunities for improvement. They value people who notice what others overlook, identify challenges before they become crises, and create practical solutions that make businesses more efficient and people's lives a little easier. That's the difference between education and reality. Education often rewards correct answers. The real world rewards meaningful contributions. Part 2a. Training your mind to see opportunities. If there's one skill I wish someone had taught me when I was a freshman in college, it wouldn't have been programming, graphic design, marketing, or even artificial intelligence. As valuable as those subjects are, the skill I wish I had learned first is something much simpler and much more powerful. I wish someone had taught me how to observe the world. At first, that may sound almost too simple to matter. After all, we observe the world every day, don't we? We walk through campus, visit coffee shops, shop at grocery stores, ride buses, scroll through social media, and interact with people from morning until night. But over the years, I've come to realize that most of us aren't truly observing anything. We're simply looking. There's an enormous difference between looking and observing. Looking is automatic. Observing is intentional. Looking allows you to notice that a coffee shop is crowded. Observing makes you wonder why customers are willing to wait 20 minutes for a cup of coffee when another cafe across the street has plenty of empty seats. Looking tells you that people are standing in line. Observing makes you ask why the line moves so slowly and whether the process could be improved. Looking sees people using an app. Observing notices where they hesitate, where they become frustrated, and where they quietly give up. The world is full of these moments. Most people experience them and move on. The people who create meaningful innovations stop and become curious. One afternoon after class, I walked across campus with two students. We weren't discussing business or technology. We were simply heading to a nearby coffee shop. After we sat down, I asked them a question that seemed completely unrelated to our conversation. "What did you notice on the way here?" The first student looked surprised. "Nothing, Professor," he said. "We just walked here." The second student paused before answering. "I noticed that the cafe across the street was much busier than this one. Several students couldn't find a place to sit, so they bought their drinks and left. Almost everyone paid with their phones. And many customers opened their laptops the moment they sat down. It almost feels more like a study space than a coffee shop." At that moment, I wasn't impressed because his answer was more detailed. I was impressed because he had trained himself to ask questions that most people never think to ask. Both students had walked along the exact same sidewalk. Both had seen the exact same buildings. Both had passed the exact same people. Yet one student simply arrived at the coffee shop. The other arrived with observations, questions, and potential ideas. That difference had nothing to do with intelligence. It had everything to do with curiosity. And curiosity can be learned. I truly believe that one of the greatest habits anyone can develop is the habit of asking, why? Why are customers waiting so long? Why do people keep making the same mistake? Why is this process more complicated than it needs to be? Why has everyone accepted this inconvenience as normal? Those simple questions have started more successful businesses than most people realize. The good news is that you don't need a special talent to develop this way of thinking. You simply need to slow down enough to notice what everyone else has stopped noticing. Part 2b. The Observation Journal. One day after class, a student came to my office and asked me a question that I hear surprisingly often. He said, "Professor, I understand that I should observe the world more carefully. But I honestly don't know where to begin. My life is pretty ordinary. I go to class, I work part-time, I go home, and then I do the same thing again the next day. Nothing interesting ever happens." I smiled because, in many ways, that answer revealed exactly why we were having this conversation. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that great ideas come from extraordinary places. In reality, they rarely do. More often than not, meaningful ideas are born from ordinary moments that everyone else has become so accustomed to that they no longer notice them. The world doesn't run out of opportunities. We simply stop paying attention to them. So I gave him a very simple assignment. I told him that starting the next day, he should carry 2 notebooks instead of 1. One notebook would still be used for lecture notes, formulas, and class materials. The second notebook, however, would have a completely different purpose. It would become his observation journal. Every time he experienced an unnecessary delay, he should write it down. Every time he saw someone struggling to use an app, he should write it down. If he visited a restaurant with excellent food but painfully slow service, he should write it down. If he found a confusing website, saw people complaining about the same product online, or watched his parents spend an hour every evening updating paperwork by hand, he should write those things down as well. I told him not to judge whether the problem was important enough, not to worry about whether it could become a business, and certainly not to think about solutions yet. His only responsibility was to become a careful observer of everyday life. At first, he looked confused and asked, "Professor, how can simply writing these things down possibly help me?" I explained that the notebook itself wasn't the point. The real purpose of the exercise was to train his brain. Our minds naturally become better at finding whatever we repeatedly ask them to look for. If you spend every day thinking about grades, your brain becomes remarkably good at finding ways to improve your academic performance. If you're constantly searching for jobs, your attention automatically shifts toward job postings. interview advice, and career opportunities. In exactly the same way, when you intentionally train yourself to notice problems, your brain gradually begins recognizing them without any conscious effort. You start seeing patterns that other people overlook. You begin noticing frustrations that have become invisible simply because everyone has accepted them as normal. That's how a new way of thinking is developed, not through a single lecture, but through hundreds of small moments of deliberate practice. About a month later, that same student came back to see me again. This time, he looked completely different. There was excitement in his voice as he said, "Professor, I can't believe how many problems are hiding in plain sight. Every single day I fill pages with observations." I smiled and asked him one simple question. "Has the world changed?" He laughed and shook his head. "No," he replied. "The world is exactly the same. The only thing that has changed is the way I see it." That answer brought me more satisfaction than any exam score ever could. Because it meant the exercise had accomplished its real purpose. The opportunities hadn't suddenly appeared. They had always been there. For the first time, he had simply learned how to recognize them. After that experience, I began encouraging all of my students to keep their own observation journal. It doesn't need to be complicated. A few short notes each day are more than enough. But every observation should answer 3 simple questions. What problem did I notice today? Who is affected by this problem? And if this problem were solved, how would that person's life become better? Those 3 questions may sound almost too simple. But if you answer them consistently for a few months, you'll accumulate hundreds of ideas for research projects, class assignments, startup concepts, or even future careers. The most remarkable part is that these ideas don't come from imagination alone. They come directly from real people living real lives. Eventually, students ask me another question. "Professor, what if I notice hundreds of problems but don't know how to solve any of them?" My answer is always the same. You are not expected to solve every problem. In fact, you shouldn't even try. At this stage, your goal isn't to become a great problem solver. Your goal is to become someone who can recognize meaningful problems. Think about an apprentice carpenter. No one expects a beginner to build an entire house on the first day. Before learning how to build, they first learn to recognize different types of wood, understand their tools, and master the fundamentals of the craft. Creating value works exactly the same way. Before you can solve important problems, you must first learn how to notice them. That ability is the foundation upon which every successful project is built. Many people believe that successful entrepreneurs possess extraordinary creativity or constantly come up with brilliant ideas. I see it differently. What separates them from everyone else isn't imagination, it's observation. While most people accept inconvenience as an unavoidable part of life, entrepreneurs see inconvenience as an invitation to improve something. They don't simply see a long line of customers waiting. They see wasted time. They don't just notice paper forms being filled out by hand. They see a process that could be simplified or digitized. They don't merely hear customers complaining. They hear opportunities waiting to be transformed into better products and better services. There's a quote that has stayed with me for many years. Every inconvenience is hiding an opportunity. That simple sentence completely changed the way I experience everyday life. Whenever something frustrates me now, instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" I ask myself a different question. Is this a problem worth solving? That single question has turned ordinary days into endless learning experiences. And I truly believe that once you develop this habit, you'll never find yourself staring at a blank screen wondering what project to build next. Life itself will keep presenting you with meaningful projects, one problem at a time. Conclusion. The day you begin to see opportunities. Before I leave you today, I'd like to ask you to imagine something. Picture yourself 5, 10, or maybe even 20 years from now. One day, you decide to visit the university where your journey began. You walk through the same entrance, follow the same sidewalks, and see the same lecture halls that once shaped your student life. The cafeteria is still crowded. The library is just as quiet as you remember. Students are sitting on benches, laughing with friends, rushing to class, or worrying about their next exam. At first glance, nothing seems to have changed. But then you realize that the greatest change isn't the campus. The greatest change is you. When you were a student, every walk across campus revolved around classes, assignments, deadlines, and grades. You passed hundreds of people every day without ever wondering what challenges they were facing. You used countless products and services without asking whether they could be designed better. Like many students, you believed that learning was about passing exams, earning a degree, and eventually finding a job. That's the path most of us were taught to follow. But I hope that after listening to this talk, you'll carry a different perspective with you. I hope that tomorrow, when you walk into a coffee shop, you won't simply order a drink and find a seat. Instead, you'll notice how customers place their orders, how employees serve them, how people make their payments, and whether the experience could be improved. When you visit a hospital, I hope you won't only wait for your turn. I hope you'll begin asking where patients are losing valuable time and how that process might become more efficient. When you use an app, I hope you won't just tap the buttons. I hope you'll notice where users become confused, where they hesitate, and where they quietly give up. And whenever you hear someone complain about a problem in everyday life, I hope your first instinct won't simply be sympathy. I hope you'll ask yourself a different question. Is this a problem worth solving? The moment you begin thinking this way, something remarkable happens. The entire city becomes your classroom. Every street teaches you something about human behavior. Every business becomes a lesson in entrepreneurship. Every hospital becomes a lesson in process improvement. Every mobile app becomes a lesson in user experience. Every customer complaint becomes a lesson in innovation. You no longer wait for professors to assign projects because life itself begins assigning them to you every single day. I also hope you'll begin seeing your college degree differently. A diploma is not the finish line of learning. It is simply proof that someone has handed you a set of tools. The real question is what you choose to build with those tools. It's entirely possible to spend years collecting knowledge without creating meaningful value for anyone else. On the other hand, some people begin with one small problem, dedicate themselves to solving it, and end up improving the lives of thousands. The difference isn't that they knew more. The difference is that they chose to begin. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, computers will write reports, generate software, analyze data, design graphics, and assist us in ways we once thought were impossible. Because of that, I believe our greatest value as human beings will no longer come from simply knowing more information. Our greatest value will come from seeing what others fail to notice. Understanding needs that technology alone cannot fully understand, and asking questions that no machine would ever think to ask. Technology can help us solve problems faster, but only people can decide which problems truly deserve to be solved. If tomorrow you walk outside and notice just one problem that you've overlooked your entire life, then I believe this talk has already achieved its purpose. Because the moment you begin seeing the world through the eyes of someone who creates value is the moment your real education begins. I'd like to leave you with one final thought that I've shared with my students for many years. Don't ask yourself where the opportunities are. Instead, ask who needs help today and what you can do to make their life a little better. If you live with that question long enough, you'll eventually discover that opportunities were never hidden from you. They were always right in front of you, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them and courageous enough to take the first step. I hope you graduate with more than a degree. I hope you become someone who creates value wherever you go. Because in the end, people won't remember us for the courses we completed or the diplomas hanging on our walls. They'll remember us for one simple reason: we made someone else's life better.